You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant, and today we have one of my favorite people in all of e-com back again, Meghan Corroon from Clerdata, here to kind of do an end-of-year recap around retail media as a whole. For those of you who've heard her speak before, either on webinars or maybe at some of these industry events like Digital Shelf Institute, just a great friend to a ton of brands and also partners in the network. And so it also has one of the only platforms, I would say, that really measures retail media measurement incrementality. But I won't tell everything you do, Meghan. I'll let you do that, but I'll kick it over. I'd love to, brief background to yourself and then Clerdata and what you're doing. And then we can kind of jump into what does the 2024 retail media recap look like?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me. It's great to be back. It's wonderful, especially wrapping up this busy year. A lot has happened, a lot of exciting stuff in the industry. So it's awesome to be here. I can give a little brief intro, but CEO, founder of Clerdata. We're a software data science company. And we measure incrementality. So the hot word on the street, that's coming up a lot. So we measure basically if you spend $1, was it worth spending on something like retail media, marketing, or trade actions? My background is varied. As you know, Aaron, I come from kind of an outsider perspective on the industry. I worked for long time measuring incremental ROI for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, in other all sorts of countries around the world, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Senegal, DRC Congo. And so there's no dirty data I haven't seen. And so there's very little that phases me in terms of challenges in the data science realm. And so I find myself here leading a software company today in this retail media industry.
Yeah, awesome. So a couple of these huge buzzwords, right? One is retail media. I would say that kicked off maybe 2.5, 3 years ago. And then, that was in the growth at all cost phase. So basically digital marketing executives are just giving gobs and gobs of cash and said, hey, go spend. And they were just spending money. And then about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago now, man, time flies. All of a sudden people started asking, within the companies, the executives like, well, what's going on with the money? And all these digital executives are like, I spent it. I spent it. And they're like, well, Where did you drive results? And they're like, well, are sales up? Yes or no? And they're like, well, yeah, I mean, sales are up, but is that due to what you're doing? Is that just normal online growth? What does it look like? What are the channels that are working? What are those that aren't? And then there's been this huge push into measurement and incrementality as a whole. Like, is it being additive or not? Is it worth spending those dollars? So now we recap, like I would say in 2024 was the year where incrementality, I know it's a buzzword, but it's a meaningful one, really caught on, and measurement was very important to a ton of executives out there. What has changed in your, from the beginning of 2024 till now? And then I don't know if there's, other things that are like top of mind for you that are important to get to as well, but let's open up the conversation.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think your background on it, you always have the best historical lens, given how long you've been in this industry and how many people you talk to on a daily basis. So I think it's really valuable to have that context for me. When we came in, 5 years ago, talking about incrementality measurement, really, strongly with CPG companies, there was a lot of eyes glazing over. I'll be honest, it wasn't so top of mind. It wasn't clear. People didn't understand what that meant. And then the economy shifted. People started spending up to really upper limits, right, at that time of marketing and trade funds on retail media, and it wasn't clear where the money was always coming from. And so more and more people began to ask questions. I'd say the last 2 years and this year in particular, the pressure on executives who are in charge of retail media and digital commerce, particularly executives, just grew so strongly in terms of you have to provide evidence if you want to keep spending this amount of revenue for the company on the promise of retail media. So it's like hype, 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 all exciting noodle salad days, as I call it. People are just going Wild West, like throwing money at it, test and learn, test, test, test. There was a lot of tests, and I think there was less learning, to be honest. The learning hadn't caught up to the testing funds. And so where we came in this year, very much so for our industry, is that, like you said, the measurement, the learn portion, learn and optimize, was kind of the word on the street this year. And I think it's basically that for next year, where it's not good enough anymore to just be another retail network, media network that's selling you more and more ads, especially that long tail of retail media networks that aren't like the big 4 or 5. And so you really have to show that it's worth it, because the dollars are not endless and consumers are stagnant, if not declining, in certain categories in terms of spending patterns. And so it just doesn't pencil out, right? At the end of the day, they have to prove value. And measurement does that. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're thinking about like the measurement piece, like are brands then using this? Because I know all the retailers, right? I can't remember what are there 600. I'm trying to think conversation we had with like Lauren, right? Or maybe a Mike Black is like there's 600 or 700.
Yeah, it's probably approaching 700 retail media networks now, right? They know the numbers better than me, but it's a lot.
A lot. So if there's that many retail media networks and everybody's asking, are you finding companies now, using this data to then say yes and no to different ones? Because what I hear from brands is brands are more than happy to invest, in some cases, overinvest in retail media if they just know it's working. They just know it's working, but it's so hard to know if it's working. And so they get into this point where they can't have an honest dialogue with the retailers that are pushing this. They can't honestly say, hey, no, I'm not going to spend because it's not working. And they say, hey, how do you know it's not working? Yeah, I don't know how it's not working.
Yeah.
Therefore, they end up investing. So like when you step in, are you finding like businesses like can then say, hey, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, to investing, or at least being able to have a candid conversation with the retailer and say, this isn't working. So let's talk about if there's an investment, what it looks like.
Yeah. So the big approach this year for our customers has been really, there's a few things. There's neutrality in measurement, right? So, us and whoever you're using for measurement, regardless of who it is, should be a neutral party, right? So the old days of having reporting and relying only on reporting from every single person who's selling you ads, every single ad platform has reporting. That isn't looking at the whole picture, and it's not neutral. Of course, like it's okay. That's just the reality of the business. So I think CPG moving beyond the platform reported, self-reported, grading your own homework kind of measurement, to rely on that reporting isn't good enough anymore. So moving to neutrality, which is where we sit, and then using that neutral apples to apples incrementality measurement, end of the line, dollar in, how many dollars out, right? Performance measurement to then shift large buckets of money sometimes. Yeah. So the goal is, like a stock portfolio, drive efficiency wherever possible politically, right? Within your relationships with retailers, to drive more performance for them and to drive more performance for the brand. So it's really a win-win for the industry at the end of the day. But it is a very hard line, evidence-based approach. I think the background now of, limited dollars, you have to steward them well, and you have to grow your business. And so that's the manufacturer's job. And to do that with more neutral evidence is basically where we come in. There is enormous opportunity in retail media, and I'll get into that a little bit, but So the other main theme this year was halo effects. So trying to understand, if I spend $1 on Walmart Connect ads, for instance, right, or Amazon ads of some kind, we know shoppers are seeing those ads. That's a set of eyeballs. And so they are probably having an effect in Costco or in Kroger or in Walgreens or wherever, right, that you might be shopping. We're all shopping in lots of places. And so if you're touching someone through a retail media network with an ad, it can have a ripple effect or a halo effect that's positive outside of its original platform, right? And so that halo effect piece is really where the exponential efficiency gains are with retail media. That's exciting, that we're seeing a lot of, and dollars are shifting there. So the more halo effects you can demonstrate, the farther that dollar is traveling, right, to earn you dollars elsewhere in other settings.
Yeah, well, I think from the standpoint of the halo effect, I'm going to go back to the neutrality piece, because I think of my days when I was selling, in corporate America side, selling to Amazon, AMG back in the day, right? Amazon Media Group way back, if I date myself a little, like they would always promote the halo effect. But their halo effect, like they were, to your words, grading their own homework.
Yeah.
Right. And there was a couple of things. And then when you sign on with an agency or a platform and the retail media network, what you have is 3 entities outside of yourself there that are incentivized to have you spend more on that specific platform.
Yeah.
And so during the heyday, you're like, hey, I've got 3 different data points. They're all saying the same thing. I have to explain a story to the executive team of why we're winning and everything's going good. Here's these data points. It's actually like supports me, and actually me as a marketer getting more funding for my channel. But we're at a different time now with the economy and profitability. I think on every podcast, I think I bring this up right now, is huge. And we really need to know where they're spending. You can't be asking them. I guess you can ask them, but you can just, ask them for their output and what they think. It's not a neutral scorecard at all, right? It's not. They're grading their own homework. They're all incentivized to have you spend more specifically with them. And they know that money's there. And if they're not spending with them, they're probably spending with the competition, which they absolutely don't want. So they're coming back with, hey, look at how amazing we are. And so,
yeah. And it's not to say that, and this is the halo effects, we hear a lot from customers, certain numbers that retail media networks, Amazon and others cite, right? And tell them all the time. And these are salespeople. These are people who just sell ads and not data scientists usually, saying, oh yeah, this is the off-platform halo effect. It's 60%. I hear that number a lot for some reason. 60% of your offline sales, right, regardless of company categories, stage of business, it's always 60%. I hear that we drive all that revenue is us, right? And it's like, that's inconceivable that that's the case. Number one, that's unbelievably high, right? I think none of your audience members are going to believe that number, period. Number two, it's not from a neutral source, to your point. There's a deep conflict of interest, and that's okay, but let's call a spade a spade. And then also, how would anyone be able to understand that if they don't have all your other sales data, right? That's impossible to calculate if you don't have the visibility into the whole company's sales data, which no company is going to give any ad platform that kind of data access. So it's simple, like logic questions of saying, hey, I need a reliable understanding of where to spend my money, just like all of us do with our stock portfolios. I want to see the ticker. I want to pull up the Wall Street Journal. I want to look at how my stocks are doing over time, and I want to make informed investment decisions. These are investments, and all these companies have a lot of competition. And to your point, profitability is the name of the game and will be for the next several years, I think, given our macroeconomic conditions. So, really getting in line with just solid, neutral evidence that is rigorous and that people can make decisions on, and then let the high performers get paid, right? Like any retail media network that is really offering a lot of halo effects is going to stand behind that neutral measurement too, because it will benefit them at the end of the day, because they're driving a lot of sales. So put more money to them, like great, access that opportunity. So that's the role we play and what we see the the conversations being now with customers is just really needing some clear, neutral insights to drive investment strategy.
Yeah, that's what they want. Everybody I talk to, that's literally what they want. Now, obviously, there's startups who are like, hey, overall, it can't, we're spending money everywhere, we're getting going. But when you get to mid-market, enterprise level, at this point in time, they just want the answers and they want to know if their agency, we're at a time now where switching agencies isn't as hard as it used to be.
Yeah.
And people are constantly evaluating their agencies and they just want to know, hey, is it working or not? And they need that independent scorecard to go do it, to evaluate it. And any good agency that's out there is probably going to be welcoming, right? You're not
Yeah.
saying shut off spend. You're saying, hey, that's not working. Do the best for, I'm thinking of like from a brand standpoint, I've got the spend. I'm usually using an agency. I've got the retail media network, or I'm using a platform, if not an agency.
Mm-hmm.
How do I just have an independent guide that's saying, hey, this is actually how you should dial it in? And you plug in and guides them to bigger sales. Like it has to be done. I don't know how people do it. Again, smaller tier company. If the ad spend isn't, millions a year, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, we're trying to divide it up here. You can do whatever you want, but at scale, and brands need that neutral data coming in. Awesome.
Yeah. And I think a lot of what we end up, there are efficiency gains, but I will be honest, especially with retail media, it tends to be the evidence needed for a retail media lead to go to C-suite or to go to the CFO or to go to others and either reclassify that spend in their expense sheet, in their P&L, to be able to access supplemental funding. So a lot of it is saying, hey, I'm going to de-risk this investment for my leadership, right? That's basically the role that we play, is we're going to use evidence that's neutral, that a C-suite and a CFO would listen to, which is not ad platform reported data, right? They don't want to see any of that. And we're going to de-risk doubling down and spending more. I can't think of a customer that isn't now spending more in some areas of retail media network ads, because there's a ton of opportunity. It's just, where is it? Where is the smart play versus the spray and pray, like you're saying, play, which is not viable, right, at scale at all. And so it's de-risking those choices and communicating them clearly with confidence because they're neutral to leadership. That's usually the role that we play for customers.
How many companies are doing this measurement well today? Because probably to smaller mid cap, I'm guessing not a ton, but I think as you get to more enterprise level, a lot of them have data science teams and they're trying to do it on their own. What is the likelihood they can do it on their own?
This is so timely because the last couple of weeks here, we've been talking with, let's say two of the top 5, right, CPG companies size wise. They all have internal data science units, sometimes multiple, that talk to each other and sometimes don't talk to each other. So there's lots of human resources within the large CPGs. There's more in certain verticals than others, I would say, depending. But at the end of the day, the approach that has been built has been to do bespoke modeling. So one by one, having a team of data scientists go through and do this kind of modeling exercise for like a brand or 3 brands within a big family of brands. And so their challenge has been to move this to scale. And it's every one of them. There isn't a large that has this basically running at full scale, to my knowledge, and we've talked to most of them. So I think it's about a build or buy scenario. The conversations we're having now and hearing the most of is that there can be a track for build. That data infrastructure is important. It certainly makes measurement easier, but none of them are there yet at running this at scale. And they have to do a lot of other things. There are a lot of demands on those units that are far beyond the one area that one question we answer, for instance. So at the moment, there's a lot of tendency to at least buy now and get the answers rolling and build in the meantime, frankly.
Well, 5 years ago, this wasn't even on the radar for people.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's no way you can prep and hire. Now, you obviously have super smart, and I mean, I came from, multi-billion-dollar company, right? Like, we've got those teams, super smart, amazing. What I see in like a lot of cases right now is going to those teams and saying, now we have something totally new for you to build. And they're like, okay, well, that would be great. Can I have a team of 5 for the next 2 years to build this? Well, no, you're a cost center, right? No, we're not adding people on there. We'll take that money and we'll spend it on marketing and exacerbate the problem that we're currently trying to understand at this point in time. And then, those people are tasked to do something that they are fully capable of doing. But the reality of the timing aspect and being given the resources is just, because these people are super smart and they're super nice, and they're
working on all sorts of interesting projects. I think the other thing is there's so many demands and pulls on the time of that team in those companies. There's also AI, right? There's also all this test and learn happening, and excitement and confusion and excitement and confusion around what the business use cases are for AI, right? Which is adjacent, but not quite the same as causal incrementality measurement. And so when you look at that, those teams are getting taxed and pulled into a lot of different spaces and have a lot of requests on their plate. And they usually run the internal MMM processes, right? But the retail media leads in these businesses are the ones really putting us to the table with the data scientists and saying, hey, vet their methodology. This is how it usually goes. We discuss in depth about the rigor. That's always satisfied by them with us. Like, coming out of academia, we're kind of over the top in terms of rigor in some ways. But then the business lead says, I need the answer now. I need the answer this year. I need it Q1. And so it's not that they may not eventually build something like this, but they have a lot to do and they don't have additional headcount. And there's AI demands, and there's leadership interest in X, Y, or Z other data science infrastructure development they're doing. They're all building data lakes and have been for years, right? That's a lengthy project. So I think there's so many priorities on their plate, so many distractions in some ways. And this is a very niche area. Like, for us, we only do this. We do literally nothing else. And so it's just a build versus buy and efficiency of, it's just a business decision and timing decision, I think, at the end of the day for them. Yeah.
Awesome. Are there like key things that you think, from your findings over the past, I don't know, few years here, that people should be thinking about? Is Amazon number 1? Is Walmart number 2? Is it Target number 3? Like, what is the normal breakdown that you see? Is the halo effect real, right? Or is that just something that's made up, or is the halo effect just less than 60%? I don't know if there's key things that are out there.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting stuff. There's halo effect is real, and it is not 60%, right? So I can say that. I'm not going to give you the answer of it depends, although I will say it does vary quite a lot by category, by customer, by brands, but I will say there's a few things that are super interesting. The halo effects are very real. Some of the non-Amazon players, Amazon has great halo effects. It is not 60%. And their tactics are not all created equally. So I will say it's really interesting when you break it down at a more granular level and say, okay, what kind of Amazon ad, or what kind of Walmart Connect ad, or whatever, or what kind of Best Buy ad is driving these incremental sales here and off platform. Then it gets super interesting, because it's not always, it's always delivering surprises, I would say, to very sophisticated marketing teams with tons of experience. So that's a really new world, I think, for everybody to navigate. And so that evidence is usually shifting a lot of money around for folks. We've looked at some interesting stuff lately with electronics, consumer electronics companies that we work with. And some of the Best Buy, right? Because we all think of Amazon, Walmart, 8451. but saw some really strong halo effects with Best Buy ads. So we're starting to do more retail media networks beyond the top four as well, top 4 or 5, and looking there. There's a lot of opportunity. What you invest in within the retail media network, I think, matters. And then the other thing we see a lot, which is quite interesting, is a sort of collapsing of the funnel, where you have also for brand teams, because they're like, well, what about us and the creative and the brand identity, right? We're seeing, especially for established brands, things that are just earned in organic social media sometimes will be driving a not insignificant amount of incrementality. For instance, maybe not as high as retail media investments, but like not nothing. And it's really cool to see the brand teams, I think, come in and say, oh, the funnel isn't so clear as it was, right? It's not so much upper funnel, lower funnel uniquely. Everything has been sped up and collapsed in a consumer journey. And so depending on where you're at, there's some interesting findings, I think, for upper funnel stuff that also drives incrementality as well.
Yeah, I really like the part around, how should the spend go? And if I break down just Amazon, because it's the most common, is it used to be, you do PPC until you see diminishing returns, which is usually you're looking at, getting reporting from your agency or, your ad tech platform, and you see returns start to go, diminishing returns on the performance of those ads. And then you go to DSP and you're good. Well, then, Amazon over the past, year and a half is made a lot of investments in Amazon Marketing Cloud, different ad types. There's been a complete blurring of the lines. And it also depends on, are you an established brand, or are you a new brand, or are you an established brand with a new product, or established brand with an old product, how you should look at it. And that, I don't want to say that's, it's a great starting point for an ad strategy. Kind of what you were saying is, if you can do this deep dive, you actually know what's working and what's not, and what to pour into, and what's that. It's going to help you fine tune an Amazon strategy. We just did a webinar yesterday on Walmart Connect.
Yeah.
And it was the same type of thing. Well, Walmart Connect has all different types of ads now.
Yep.
And if you can design the right strategy, and if you can have the right content on your detail pages, if you can put basically the same focus that you did on Amazon in the early days and Walmart and now, and do paid media, you can drive significant results no matter what category you're in. The problem is putting together that holistic strategy. That people just, it's something without a tool like Clerdata, right? They don't even know where to start. And then you're talking about just throwing money at the wall. And, going back to the first part of this conversation was, the digital marketers are being held more accountable than ever before for every dollar they spend. And so when you ask them to take a risk, they're more risk averse than ever at this point in time, which is completely different again from 2.5, 3 years ago, where they're basically said, there's no risk, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Now the pendulum has completely come back the other way, is explain every single dollar and the incrementality behind it, or you might not get it again next year.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think we always think of ourselves as, the teams know very well their hypotheses, and they generate new ones and exciting ones every day, right? If they have the budget to deploy. Our tool is speeding up the testing and realignment of what worked and what didn't, with either saying, hey, that hypothesis didn't pan out as expected, but we just learned something valuable. Let's redeploy, investment, or that was great. Let's do that further. And just catching it before it's at the end of a year and you're looking back and your sales don't align to what your agency said, right? Or everything was looking fine. And then all of a sudden it's end of year and you're trying to make up, benchmark data on top line sales. And so it's sort of like, don't let it get off track that far. It's a very confusing world. Experienced marketers are still confused. And the ad platforms, no offense to them, but their job is to sell ads, and adding more and more ways and more things you can buy is simply their business, and rightly so. But that does not benefit. Having more and more choices does not benefit a human's ability to make an informed decision. It just makes it harder sometimes and more confusing. So I think we're just kind of setting that and saying, hey, set hypotheses, be bold, be risky, but let's know quickly in real time if it's working or not, so you can correct and not go 90 miles an hour in the wrong direction potentially, which you don't find out till later. So it's just shortcutting that learning cycle, basically. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much again, Meghan, for your time today. Always a pleasure catching up. Thanks so much for all the support you give all the brands and partners in the network. Again, everybody, Meghan Corroon from Clerdata. Find her on LinkedIn or reach out to her online. But with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks, everybody, for listening in.